Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, GodsLAYERS. I'm Sal and today I'm going to be breaking down loot, more specifically weapons, in my first part of my 3-part loot guide. I'll be telling you what the best weapons to get are, where to get them, and what builds that might fit best with. First, you should know there are 5 types of weapons in the game: long swords, dual blades, polearms, great swords, and hammers. Long swords are by far the easiest to use. If you're a beginner, that would be the weapon I would suggest you to start with. Dual blades are effective, but take some time getting used to. You will find yourself clicking R1 quite a lot. Polearms are quite powerful, but don't let you get enough hits in at times to recover overhealth and health as fast as the enemy can take it away. The same can be said for great swords, which is really slow, but its northern technique does massive damage. Hammers are very powerful, but they don't feel as rewarding for their slow movement compared to the damage you deal with other weapons. It really can be utilized for its southern technique, which can deal out huge damage. I personally use a longsword most of the time, with the other weapons as secondaries. If anything confuses you on a weapon, simply hover over it and press square. A list of items will come up and try to better explain what things do on that weapon. Now, weapons can be upgraded using Incarnate Essence, Sunsteel, and Orbs of Oblivion. You can earn Incarnate Essence, Orbs of Oblivion, and Sunsteel from defeating bosses in Dreamstones. More specifically, level 32 Solaris, level 42 Greaves, level 48 Solaris, level 57 Greaves, or if you have the Fire and Darkness DLC, the Kurgani Dreamstones also reward Orbs of Oblivion. From the first upgrade until the last, it takes about 20 Orbs of Oblivion for each weapon. Another thing you'll notice is that these weapons they can deal elemental damage. There are 5 elements in total: fire, water, earth, void, and physical. Fire does ignite damage, water does chill damage, earth does poison damage, void does cursed damage, and physical does bleed damage. You can tell what elemental damage your weapon does by looking at the wording right below the big number when you're looking at the weapon stats page. These weapons can also range from common rarity to legendary rarity. Keep in mind that you can upgrade weapons to legendary by using the enchant at the forge in your sanctum. The next thing that you should know is that certain weapons can only be found in certain game modes. For example, double primary weapons can only be found in ATOT. Double primary weapons are weapons that can have 2 of any of the other primaries of that weapon in the game. There are 5 total double primary weapons in the game, 1 for each type of weapon. For long swords, you have the Sword of Dominance. For dual blades, it's the Twin Dragons. For great sword, it's the Eye of the Unknown. For polearms, it's the Sunflare Destiny. And for hammers, it's the Maul of the Obsidian Pack. Other weapons that can be found in certain game mode are cursed weapons, which can only be found in the Lightbringer game mode. These items will need to be uncursed before you can use them, or more specifically, use them correctly. These items will all have negative stats, which will turn to positive after uncursing them. Keep in mind, before uncursing them, that the negative stats will affect you. The last type of special weapons are primal weapons. These are weapons that have the higher primary stats than a normal item would. They can only be found in ATOT. Keep in mind that you cannot get double primary items or cursed items as primal items. These items will also only have 3 total secondaries when fully upgraded rather than 4. Now let's start breaking down what the best weapons are for each type of weapon. First, we will go through which greatsword you want to be on the lookout for. Let's start with the double primary greatsword, the Eye of the Unknown. This can have any of the 2 other primary stats from any of the other greatswords in the game, with the exception of cursed greatswords. It cannot roll as a primal, and it can come in any element. These are the primaries you want to look out for, or combos of these primaries on your Eye of the Unknown. Base boost in weapon charge speed, crit chance with your Northern technique, breach damage during Rampage, and when you perform a takedown, gain Archon charge. Also, gain greater blessing of power when you defeat unmarked enemy. The best Eye of the Unknown, in my opinion, is the combination of crit chance with your Northern technique and enter Rampage whenever you use your Northern technique. This can really do big damage when you are using a weak point build with the charging line augment from the Lightbringer game mode, which increases our weak point damage equal to our Rampage bonus damage. Next up is our Bramble, a legendary greatsword that can only be found in the Lightbringer game mode. Keep in mind you will have to uncurse this item when you first get it by following the objective listed at the bottom of the weapons. You have to do this 3 times. It can come in any element. Its primary gives us more crit damage up to 8 times for every crit we hit. We lose that charge on a non-critical hit. Secondaries you would ideally want are crit chance and crit damage. Next is the Alazkilik, the Fire of Hate, a legendary greatsword that can be found anywhere. This weapon can only come in the fire element. Its primary has defeated ignited enemies, explode, and deal damage to nearby enemies. It also has our weapon techniques inflict ailments. Secondaries you would ideally want are damage to ignited enemies and crit chance. After that is the Glory of Dawn. This is an epic greatsword that can be found anywhere and can come in any element. This gives us a base boost in crit chance for our Northern technique. Secondaries you would ideally want are crit damage, doubled, and then add crit damage again as your last upgrade. Next is Oblivion, an epic greatsword that can be found anywhere. It can roll in any element. Its primary increases our breach damage during Rampage. Secondaries you would ideally want are crit chance and weapon tech damage. This can be used in Breach Armistice builds. Next is the Harmonic Blade. This is an uncommon item that can be found anywhere. This gives us a base boost in takedown damage. Secondaries you would ideally want would be crit chance and takedown damage. This would work really well in a takedown build. Last for our greatswords is an uncommon greatsword Serenity that can be found anywhere. Its primary simply gives us more crit damage. Secondaries you would ideally want are crit chance and crit damage. Also, it can come in any element. Now, let's move on to longswords. First, we have our Sword of Dominance, the most versatile longsword in the game. A double primary item that can roll with any 2 of the other primaries from any of the other longswords, excluding Lightbringer. It cannot roll as a primal, and it can come in any element. These are the primaries you want to look out for, or combos of these primaries. Gain the greater blessing of luck when you inflict an ailment. Gain the blessing of luck with your Northern technique. Gain the blessing of infusion with your Southern technique. More Northern tech damage. More Southern tech damage. Shield charge when you perform a critical hit. When you inflict bleed, shoot up to 2 projectiles. Gain Northern tech charge when you hit an enemy with your Southern technique. When you defeat an enemy with your Southern technique, the enemy explodes and does fire damage to nearby enemies. And when you hit a weak point, a burst of energy deals void damage to all nearby enemies. Any combination of these are really good, and you want to use the combo that best fits with your build. For just overall damage, the best combo in my opinion is more Northern tech damage and gain the greater blessing of luck when you inflict an ailment combo. Next up is our Drazkul Legacy, a legendary longsword that can be found anywhere, and can come in any element. Its primary gives us the blessing of luck whenever we hit an enemy with our Northern technique, and the blessing of infusion when we hit an enemy with our Southern technique. The blessing of luck increases our crit chance by 20%. The Blessing of Infusion gives us the ability to inflict an ailment with regular sword swings. Next up is a Sword of Courage, a legendary longsword that can be found anywhere. It only comes in physical damage. This weapon shoots 2 projectiles whenever you inflict bleed and is quite a popular longsword among players. Next is the Sword of the Archons. This is a legendary sword that can be found in the Lightbringer game mode. This can come in any element. This weapon gives us significant more Soul Shatter buildup if we have less might than any other attribute. After that is another longsword that you can only get from the Lightbringer game mode. This time you can only get it in the water element though. It's the Shard of Creation, a legendary longsword. Its primary gives us more damage whenever we consume an enemy up to 4 times. This can be paired with the Heavenly Reversal Ring, which has timing attacks consume ailments. Next up is our trusty Seath. This is an epic longsword that can be found anywhere. It can also roll in any element. Its primary gives us a boost in crit chance when we inflict an ailment, also known as the Greater Blessing of Luck. This one is one of the strongest weapons in the game. After that is our Rosary Longsword, an epic longsword that you can get from anywhere. It can come in any element. This gives us Northern Tech Charge when we hit an enemy with our Southern Technique. Next up is the Dragon Coil, an epic longsword that can be found anywhere and roll in any element. Its primary gives you shield charge whenever you crit. This can be useful for consume builds. Last for our longswords is the Vendetta Longsword, an uncommon longsword that can roll in any element and be found anywhere. Its primary increases our weak point damage. This could be used if you were just going for a straight up weak point DPS build. Now, onto our polearms. First up is our double primary polearm, and that is called the Sunflare Destiny. Just like the other double primaries, it can have 2 primary traits of any of the other polearms in the game with the exception of Lightbringer polearms. It cannot roll as a primal, and it can come in any element. These are the primaries you want to look out for, or combos of these primaries on your weapon. Plus more damage at full health, gain the Greater Blessing of Endurance when you inflict an ailment, blind enemies whenever you hit a weak point, apply stasis to enemies whenever you hit a weak point, gain the Blessing of Endurance when you inflict an ailment, 30% chance to summon a Spirit Warrior ally when you perform a death blow, and with polearms you tend to do quite a few death blows. When you hit a shocked enemy, release a shockwave that does air damage to enemies in front of you. Now, this is the Rahir Shame primary. A lot of people like to get this and the one very similar to it on, the rare item, and is considered one of the strongest polearms in the game. I haven't found one yet, and I'm still looking for one, but pretty much it's the Rahir Shame double primary. Any combination of these, though, are really good, and you want to use the combo that best fits with your build. Although the best combo, in my opinion, is more damage at full health and gain the Greater Blessing of Endurance when you inflict an ailment. Gaining the Greater Blessing of Endurance will allow you to take less damage from enemies. Next up is our Raven's Crescent Glaive. This is a legendary polearm that can be found anywhere. It's also one of the most unique looking polearms in the game. It can come in any element. Its primary applies stasis to enemies whenever you hit a weak point. This will essentially statufy them in place for a few brief moments at a time when you hit their weak points. Next up is our Akashim Fan. This is an epic polearm that can only be gotten from the Lightbringer game mode. It can come in only the fire element. Whenever you first receive it, it will have to be uncursed 3 times by completing the objectives listed at the bottom of the item. Its primary increases our ignite power when we hit an enemy that is not yet inflicted with ignite. This means we want to hit the enemy first before we use our technique and inflict ignite. This increases our ignite power. This mostly used in ailment builds, but works just as well in DPS builds, and it looks phenomenal. Next up, we have another Lightbringer only item, and that's the legendary polearm, the Trial Runner Javelin. This can come in any element and will need to be uncursed 3 times by completing the objectives listed at the bottom of the item. Its primary gives us a dueling charge that increases our weak point damage every time we hit a weak point, until we are hit. You can really do some massive damage with this polearm, and in my opinion, it's one of the strongest polearms in the entire game. Next up, we have our Red Dragon Tail. This is an epic polearm that you can get from anywhere. Keep in mind, primal versions can only be gotten from ATOT, and it only rolls with the fire element. Its primary increases our damage when we are at full health. When used with the right build, this can be very powerful. Next, we have the Rehear Shame. This is an epic polearm that I mentioned earlier. You can find it anywhere. It rolls in only the air element. Its primary releases a shockwave of air damage every time we hit a shock-afflicted enemy. The primal version of this can only be gotten from ATOT, and is very powerful. I highly recommend you trying to find one of these in the primal version. After that, we have our Renzai Mancatcher. This again is an epic polearm that can be found anywhere, and can roll in any element. Its primary blinds enemies whenever we hit a weak point. This works really well with the green 15 white recluse augment, which applies the mark of leeching whenever you blind your enemies. This heals you and nearby allies when you hit the mark afflicted enemy. Now, onto our hammers. Now, for hammers, I generally suggest to only use these as secondary weapons because they are very, very slow to swing, and in that time, an enemy can 2 or even 1-shot you while you're winding up your swing. Most times, I tend to just pull it out, use the Southern Technique twice, and switch back to whatever primary weapon I'm currently using. Let's start with the double primary version of this weapon, and that is the Maw of the Obsidian Pack. This is a double primary item that can only be found in ATOT. It cannot roll as a primal, and it can come in any element. These are the primaries you want to look out for, or any combo of these primaries. Gain the Blessing of Endurance when you defeat an ailment-afflicted enemy. Whenever you perform a weapon technique, create a time bubble that slows enemies. Gain Overhealth when you defeat an enemy with a technique. Gain Overhealth when you defeat an enemy with a technique and Overhealth Retention combined. Gain Banner Charge whenever you hit an enemy with a weapon technique. And gain the Greater Blessing of Endurance when you defeat an ailment-afflicted enemy. Any combination of these are really good, and you want to use the combo that best fits with your build. Although the best combo in my opinion is gain Overhealth when you defeat an enemy with a weapon technique with Overhealth Retention, and when you perform a weapon technique, create a time bubble. Next up is our Darkstar Crusher. This is a legendary warhammer that can be found anywhere. It does not have a primal version and can roll in any element. Its primary creates a time bubble whenever we use our weapon technique. This is useful for slowing down enemies, especially if you're a glass cannon build. Now, I don't use hammers much except with the exception of the Darkstar Crusher or one of the Maw of the Obsidian Pack combos. Now, let's move on to our final weapon, the Dual Blades. Now, I'll be upfront and say that I don't use Dual Blades much, if at all. I have made several builds with them in the past, but I just don't like the way they feel personally. Now, with that being said, I do have a few recommendations in terms of Dual Blades, so let's start with the double primary Dual Blades, the Twin Dragons. Just like the other double primaries, it can have 2 primary traits of any of the other Dual Blades in the game, with the exception of Lightbringer Dual Blades. It cannot roll as a primal, and they can come in any element. These are the primaries you want to look out for, or combos of these primaries. Whenever you use your Northern Technique, when your inner focus is near full charge, double the Soul Shatter buildup on nearby enemies. When inner focus is active, you deal more damage, but enemies deal more damage to you. Gain Weapon Charge whenever you Soul Shatter an enemy. Gain Weapon Charge whenever you hit a full health enemy. Gain Weapon Charge whenever you inflict an ailment on an enemy. And restore health to you and nearby allies whenever you inflict an ailment. Any combination of these are really good, and you would want to use the combo that best fits your build. Although the best combo in my opinion is restore health to you and nearby allies when you inflict an ailment, and gain Weapon Charge when you inflict an ailment. The next pair of dual blades on our list are the Myoke Fangs. These are legendary cursed dual blades that you can only get from the Lightbringer game mode. They can roll with only earth damage, which deals out poison. Whenever you first receive this item, you will have to uncurse it 3 times by following the objective listed at the bottom of the weapon. Its primary has our attacks during inner focus increase enemy poison duration if we have 60% or more earth resistance. This is used quite a bit in the spread build where you use the God Beast Icar charm, which spreads remaining poison of defeated enemies to those that are still alive. Last but certainly not least are the Wanderer's Ambition. These are what I most widely see used among dual blade users. It can come in any element and they are epic dual blades that can be found anywhere. Its primary increases the damage you deal, but also increases the damage enemies deal to you. It's truly a glass cannon set of dual blades. Well, that's all I have for the first part of this Ultimate Godfall guide. Part 2 will be about augments. I can't wait to share it with you all. I'd like to take this time to thank you all for watching and invite you to the GODSLAYERS Gaming Community Discord. The link is pinned in the comment section below and listed in the description area. There we have players who are active consistently, playing every game mode, sharing builds, and becoming better at the game. Thank you all so much for all the support you've shown. I'll have an upcoming future content video to let you all know what you can expect in the future and year to come. Until next time, take care.